Captain Jake Morrison stood at the bridge of the exploration vessel Endeavour, watching the massive alien space station grow larger on the main screen. 3 years of careful radio communications had led to this moment. The Zephyrian Alliance had finally agreed to meet with humanity face to face. "Distance to Harmony Point Station, Amy?" Jake asked his communications officer. Amy Turner checked her console and replied, 2,000 kilometers in closing, Captain. They're sending docking instructions now. Dr. Lisa Kim adjusted her uniform nervously. As the ship's xenobiologist, she would be part of the first human delegation to meet an alien species. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on her shoulders. She had studied every piece of data about the Zephyrians, but nothing could prepare her for actually meeting them. "Captain, the aliens are requesting our ship manifest again," Amy reported. "They seem particularly interested in our crew size and any additional personnel." Jake frowned. This was the third time they had asked for the same information. "Send them the standard manifest?" "Nothing has changed since yesterday." Ryan Brooks, the security chief, entered the bridge with Rex padding quietly beside him. The large German Shepherd had been the ship's mascot for 2 years, providing comfort to the crew during their long journey through space. Rex's handler, Corporal Danny White, followed close behind. "Captain, Rex is ready for the meeting," Danny announced. "He's been bathed and his diplomatic vest is clean." The idea of bringing Rex had been Dr. Kim's suggestion. Many human diplomats throughout history had used pets to break the ice during tense negotiations. Rex was gentle, well-trained, and had a calming effect on everyone who met him. The crew had voted unanimously to include him in the delegation. "Good thinking, Danny," Jake said, reaching down to scratch Rex behind the ears. The dog's tail wagged slowly, and he looked up at the captain with trusting brown eyes. Amy suddenly looked concerned. "Captain, I'm receiving multiple transmissions from the station. They're asking about biological entities aboard our ship. They want to know if we're carrying any predatory species." "Predatory species?" Dr. Kim asked. "Rex is the only animal on board, and he's hardly predatory. He's a companion animal." Jake considered this. Maybe they're worried about diseases or contamination. "Tell them we have one domestic animal aboard, a canine companion. Include Rex's medical records and training certifications." The response came back within minutes. Amy's face went pale as she read the message. "Captain, they're asking us to leave Rex on the ship. They say predators are not welcome at diplomatic meetings." "Predators?" Ryan laughed. "Rex? He's afraid of the vacuum cleaner." Danny knelt beside Rex and hugged the dog protectively. "Rex isn't a predator, Captain. He's family." Dr. Kim studied the alien message on her tablet. "This is interesting. Their translation might be imperfect, or they might have different categories for animals. Many species classify creatures differently than we do." Jake made his decision. "We'll bring Rex. If they're concerned about safety, they can see for themselves that he's harmless. Besides, leaving him behind sends the wrong message about humanity. We don't abandon our friends." The docking procedure took an hour. The Endeavour shuttle bay opened to reveal a sleek alien transport waiting to take them to the station's diplomatic center. The alien craft was beautiful but sterile, lacking any personal touches or decorations. Jake led the delegation into the transport, followed by Dr. Kim, Ryan, Danny, and Rex. The dog settled quietly on the floor, his service vest clearly marking him as a working animal. His calm demeanor and gentle eyes made him look anything but threatening. The transport glided silently through the station's corridors. Through the windows they could see various alien species moving about their business. The beings were tall, graceful, and moved with careful precision. Their skin had a blue-gray tint, and their large eyes seemed to take in everything at once. "They're beautiful," Dr. Kim whispered. The transport delivered them to a vast, circular chamber with a domed ceiling. The room was designed to accommodate multiple species, with different atmospheric zones and temperature controls. At the center stood a raised platform where 7 aliens waited. Ambassador Veltar stepped forward as the humans approached. His species, the Corvani, were the most humanoid of the Alliance members, though his skin had a slight blue tint and his eyes were larger than human normal. He wore elegant robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. "Welcome, humans of Earth," Veltar said in accented but clear English. "We greet you in the name of the Zephian Alliance." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand. "Thank you, Ambassador. I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Government." Veltar looked at Jake's extended hand uncertainly, then slowly reached out to shake it. His skin felt cool and smooth like polished stone. "This is a historic moment for both our species." Dr. Kim noticed that all the aliens kept glancing at something behind the human delegation. Their large eyes would dart back and forth, never settling on any one human for long. She turned to see what they were looking at. Rex sat quietly beside Danny, his tongue hanging out slightly in what humans recognized as a relaxed expression. His brown eyes were alert but friendly, and his tail moved in a slow, gentle wag. "Ambassador," Dr. Kim said, "I notice your delegation seems interested in our companion. This is Rex, our ship's therapy animal. He helps reduce stress during long space voyages." And the moment Dr. Kim mentioned Rex, all 7 aliens took a step backward. Veltara's skin color shifted from blue to a pale yellow, and his breathing became rapid and shallow. "Therapy animal?" Veltar asked, his voice strained. "You brought an apex predator to a diplomatic meeting?" "Apex predator?" Ryan laughed again. "Rex is the gentlest dog in the fleet. He's trained to comfort people, not hurt them." Rex, sensing the tension in the room, stood up slowly and took a single step forward. His movement was casual and non-threatening. But the effect on the aliens was immediate and dramatic. All 7 aliens retreated rapidly, their translator devices suddenly screaming warnings about death dealers and pack hunters. Veltara's skin went completely yellow, and his species equivalent of sweat began beading on his forehead. "Ambassador, please," Jake said, raising his hands peacefully. "Rex is completely harmless. He's a companion animal, bred for loyalty and gentleness." But Veltar was no longer listening. His eyes were fixed on Rex with what could only be described as pure terror. "You have bonded with an apex predator. You command death itself." Rex, confused by the commotion, tilted his head and wagged his tail harder. To the humans, his expression was endearing and curious. To the aliens, it appeared to be a threat display from a dangerous carnivore. "How many of these creatures do you control?" Veltar demanded, backing toward the exit. "Control?" Danny stepped forward, his voice defensive. "We don't control Rex? He's our friend?" The word friend seemed to terrify the aliens even more. They began speaking rapidly in their own language, their translator devices struggling to keep up. Words like symbiosis, pack leader, and genetic bonding filled the air. "This meeting is over," Veltar declared, his voice shaking. "Humanity is too dangerous for galactic society. You will be contacted through remote channels only. Ambassador, wait." Jake called out, but the aliens were already fleeing the chamber. "Rex." Wind softly and looked up at Danny with confused eyes. The dog had no idea that his mere presence had just destroyed humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. The humans stood alone in the vast chamber, the weight of failure heavy on their shoulders. Rex sat down and tilted his head, still, trying to understand why the strangers had run away. "What just happened?" Amy whispered. Dr. Kim stared at the empty chamber, her mind racing. "I think we just learned that the universe is more afraid of us than we are of it." 3 weeks after the disaster at Harmony Point, xenobiologist Quillmuth of the Ethereal Collective finished his report on humanity. His 8 tentacles moved gracefully over the crystalline data interface as he compiled the most comprehensive threat assessment in galactic history. The report began with a simple classification that would change everything. Species, Homo sapiens. Threat level, extreme. Reason, apex predator symbiosis. Quillmuth paused, his translucent body shimmering with concern. In his 300 years of studying alien species, he had never encountered anything like humanity's. Bond with their creatures, the document described Earth canines as Class A Apex, Predators with crushing jaw strength capable of breaking bone. Their enhanced hearing could detect sounds across vast distances, while their scent tracking abilities surpassed even the most advanced alien technology. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to share a telepathic connection with their human masters. Observations indicate that humans control these predators through unknown psychic means, Quillmuth wrote. The creatures respond to human emotions and commands without visible or audible signals. This suggests a level of biological integration that defies known scientific principles. The report spread through the galactic network like wildfire. Within hours, every major civilization had received copies. The hegemony of Scales immediately issued a military alert, while the peaceful Verdant Collective began emergency evacuation procedures for their border worlds near human space on the human colony world of New Montana. Rancher Pete Johnson had no idea that his daily life was being classified as a weapon of war. He stood in his kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the alien landscape in shades of gold and purple. His wife Carol was already outside, tending to their livestock with their border collie Buddy at her side. The morning peace was shattered by a thunderous crash from the northern pasture. Pete grabbed his rifle and ran outside, expecting to find that one of the local predators had broken through their fence. Instead, he found a smoking crater and the twisted wreckage of what looked like a small spacecraft. "Carol," he shouted, running toward the crash site. "Get the emergency kit." Buddy reached the wreckage first, barking frantically at something inside the crumpled metal. Pete arrived seconds later to find a small, blue-skinned alien trapped beneath. A piece of debris? The creature's large eyes were closed, and green fluid that might have been blood trickled from a wound on its head. "Easy, boy," Pete said, kneeling beside the alien. Buddy immediately stopped barking and sat down, his tail wagging slowly. The dog seemed to understand that this was a rescue, not a threat. The alien's eyes fluttered open, and it immediately began making high-pitched sounds that Pete assumed were words. The creature tried to move but winced in pain. Pete could see that its leg was bent at an unnatural angle. "Carol," Pete called again. "Bring the medical supplies." The alien's eyes went wide with terror when it saw Buddy sitting nearby. It began struggling against the debris, clearly trying to escape from what it perceived as a dangerous predator. Pete noticed the alien's skin changing from blue to a sickly yellow color. "Hey, it's okay," Pete said softly, the same tone he used with frightened animals. "We're going to help you." Carol arrived with their emergency medical kit, which included supplies for both human and alien physiology. The colony had prepared for the possibility of first contact, though they had never expected it to happen in their backyard. The alien continued making distressed sounds while staring at Buddy. Pete noticed that every time the dog moved, even slightly, the alien's panic increased. "I think it's afraid of Buddy," Pete told Carol. "Afraid of Buddy?" Carol looked at their gentle border collie, who was now lying down in a submissive position. "He wouldn't hurt a fly." Pete carefully lifted the debris off the alien's leg. The creature was small, no bigger than a human child, with delicate features and skin that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Its breathing was shallow and rapid, and its eyes never left Buddy. "We need to get him inside," Carol said, opening the medical kit. "He's going into shock." They carefully lifted the alien and carried it toward the house. Buddy followed at a respectful distance, his head low and his movements slow and non-threatening. The dog seemed to sense that his presence was causing distress. Over the next several hours, Pete and Carol worked to stabilize their unexpected guest. The alien's universal translator had been damaged in the crash, so communication was limited to gestures and simple sounds. They managed to set its broken leg and clean its wounds, while Buddy kept watch from across the room. The alien, who they learned was named HFY, slowly began to relax as the pain medication took effect. But its eyes still tracked Buddy's every movement with obvious fear. When the dog yawned, showing his teeth, HFY nearly jumped off the couch. "I don't understand why he's so scared," Carol whispered to Pete. "Buddy's the gentlest dog on the planet." Pete watched as Buddy slowly approached HFY, moving with the careful patience he showed around newborn livestock. The dog stopped several feet away and lay down, resting his head on his paws. His brown eyes were soft and kind, and his tail moved in a slow, gentle wag. Keshva stared at the dog for several minutes. Gradually, its skin began to return to a healthier blue color. The alien seemed to be realizing that this apex predator was not behaving like a threat when Buddy began to doze in the afternoon sun. Keshva appeared almost mesmerized. The alien had never seen a predator simply rest in the presence of potential prey. In its world, carnivores were always alert, always hunting, always dangerous. That evening, as Pete prepared dinner, Buddy performed his usual routine of checking on the livestock. Keshva watched through the window as the dog herded sheep, with gentle nudges and soft barks. The alien's translator finally came online, and its first words were a confused whisper. "The predator ... protects?" "That's right," Pete said, sitting beside the couch. "Buddy protects the sheep. He's a guardian." Keshva's large eyes blinked slowly. "Guardian predator. This is not possible." "It's very possible," Carol said, bringing the alien a bowl of broth. "Buddy loves those sheep. He would never hurt them." The word love seemed to break something in Keshva's understanding. The alien's translator struggled with the concept, producing several different words that didn't quite capture the meaning. "Love?" Keshva asked. "You love the predator?" "Of course," Pete said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Buddy's family. Over the following days, Keshva observed the strange relationship between the humans and their monster. He watched Buddy play with the farm children, bringing them toys and letting them ride on his back. He saw the dog comfort Carol when she was sad, resting his head on her lap and staying close. He witnessed Buddy's joy when Pete returned from town, the dog's entire body wiggling with happiness. Most confusing of all, Keshva began to feel something he had never experienced before. When Buddy brought him his medication each morning, carrying the pills gently in his mouth, the alien felt a warm sensation in his chest. When the dog rested beside the couch during thunderstorms, Keshva felt safer, but even as Keshva began to understand, the rest of the galaxy was receiving very different reports. Automated monitoring systems had detected the crash and recorded the rescue operation. To distant observers, it appeared that humans had used their apex predator to capture and interrogate an alien pilot, the Galactic Intelligence. Networks buzzed with new theories about humanity's dangerous capabilities. Some suggested that humans could telepathically control any predator species, making them the ultimate biological weapons. Others theorized that the human-canine bond was just the beginning of a larger program to weaponize Earth's ecosystem. Quillmoth updated his report with new observations. Evidence suggests humans use their predator allies for intelligence gathering and prisoner management. The psychological warfare implications are staggering. As fear spread through the galaxy, Keshva was learning a different truth. On his final night at the Johnson farm, he sat on the porch with Pete and Carol, watching Buddy chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. The dog's playful antics made all three of them laugh, and for a moment, Keshva forgot that he was supposed to be afraid. "I must tell my people," Keshva said quietly. "They do not understand," Pete nodded. "We hope they'll listen." But as Keshva prepared to leave, he knew that his people would never believe what he had seen. A predator that loved, a monster that protected, a creature that chose loyalty over hunting. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their capacity to transform natural enemies into faithful friends. Unfortunately, that lesson would come at a terrible cost. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Centralis, with representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. Ambassador Veltar stood at the central podium, his blue skin still pale from his encounter with humanity weeks earlier. "Fellow beings," Veltar began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "we face an unprecedented threat. The species known as humans have formed symbiotic bonds with apex predators. They control these creatures through unknown means and use them as weapons of psychological warfare." A murmur of concern rippled through the assembly. The insectoid delegate from the Hive Collective clicked its mandibles nervously, while the crystalline representative of the Silicon Brotherhood flickered with agitated light patterns. "What do you propose?" asked General Fakemore of the hegemony of scales, his reptilian features showing barely controlled aggression. "Total quarantine," Veltar replied without hesitation. "All human territories must be sealed off from galactic civilization. They must surrender their war beasts or face complete isolation." On Earth, President Helen Rodriguez sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the Capitol, surrounded by her top advisors. The large screens showed the galactic ultimatum. That had arrived an hour earlier, along with disturbing intelligence reports from across human space. "Colonel Carter, what's our military assessment?" the president asked. Colonel Sam Carter, a decorated veteran with graying hair, stood up from the briefing table. "Madam President, we're seeing increased alien activity near all our colony worlds. Long-range sensors have detected scout ships conducting what appears to be surveillance operations. They're particularly focused on agricultural settlements and civilian populations." Dr. Ben Ross from the Department of Xenobiology leaned forward. "The patterns suggest they're cataloging our domestic animal populations. Every farm, every pet owner, every working animal facility is being monitored." Agent Maria Santos from Earth Intelligence added her own disturbing findings. "We've intercepted alien communications, discussing something called the Predator Protocol. They're treating our pets like weapons of mass destruction." President Rodriguez rubbed her temples. "This is insane. We're talking about dogs and cats, not bioweapons." "To them, there's no difference," Dr. Ross explained. "Their cultures don't have concepts of pet ownership or interspecies companionship. They see predators as threats to be eliminated, not friends to be loved." The situation became even more complicated when Agent Santos activated the main screen. This is where things get worse. They intercepted one of our military training videos. The screen showed footage of Navy SEALs conducting exercises with military working dogs. The highly trained animals attacked padded targets, detected explosives, and performed complex tactical maneuvers alongside their human handlers. To human eyes, it was an impressive display of teamwork and training. "Now imagine watching this." "If you believe dogs are monsters," Santos said grimly. The video continued, showing dolphins working with underwater demolition teams, horses carrying cavalry units, and police dogs apprehending suspects. Each scene reinforced the alien belief that humanity had weaponized multiple species of dangerous predators. President Rodriguez watched the footage with growing horror. "They think we're building an army of monsters." "It gets worse, Colonel," Carter said. The aliens also intercepted footage from a dog show. They're interpreting the obedience competitions as combat training exercises. On the screen, a perfectly groomed poodle performed an agility course, jumping through hoops and navigating obstacles with precision. The crowd cheered as the dog completed the course and received a treat from its handler. "They think the treats are some kind of psychological conditioning," Dr. Ross explained. "They believe we're using food rewards to program killer instincts." 3,000 light-years away, on the research station Kepler-7, Dr. Frank Miller was preparing for what he hoped would be a breakthrough in human-alien relations. His team had been working on a joint research project with Corvani scientists, studying the psychological effects of long-term space travel. "Remember, everyone," Dr. Miller addressed his staff, "this is our chance to show them that we're not the monsters they think we are. We're going to demonstrate human compassion and scientific collaboration." His therapy dog Max sat beside him, wearing his service vest and wagging his tail gently. Max was a golden retriever trained specifically to help researchers deal with the stress and isolation of deep space work. His presence had reduced anxiety levels among the human staff by 60%. "Dr. Miller," his assistant called out, "the Corvani delegation is requesting permission to dock." "Excellent," Dr. Miller replied, scratching Max behind the ears. "Let's make history." The Corvani scientists arrived in full environmental suits, despite the station's perfectly compatible atmosphere. Their leader, Dr. Zethai moved cautiously through the corridors, constantly scanning for threats. "Welcome to Kepler 7, Dr. Miller said warmly, extending his hand. "We're honored to have you here." Dr. Zethai stared at the offered hand for several seconds before reluctantly shaking it. "We appreciate this opportunity for scientific cooperation," he said. Though his voice suggested otherwise, the tour began smoothly, with Dr. Miller explaining their research into the psychological effects of isolation. The Corvani delegation seemed genuinely interested in the human approach to mental health, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions. Then Max entered the room. The golden retriever had been sleeping in Dr. Miller's office and wandered out to investigate the new voices. His tail wagged as he approached the group, curious about the strange-smelling visitors. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. All 5 Corvani scientists backed against the wall, their breathing rapid and shallow. Dr. Zethai's skin shifted to the same pale yellow that Veltar had displayed during first contact. "Why have you brought an apex predator to a scientific facility?" Dr. Zethai demanded, his voice shaking with terror. "Max isn't a predator," Dr. Miller said, confused by the extreme reaction. "He's a therapy animal. He helps reduce stress and anxiety among our staff." "Stress reduction?" Dr. Zethai stared at Max with obvious disbelief. "You use a carnivore to calm your people?" Max, sensing the tension in the room, did what he was trained to do. He slowly approached the terrified aliens, his head low and his movements gentle. His brown eyes were soft and kind, and he made a small whining sound that humans recognized as concern. To the Corvani scientists, Max's approach looked like a hunting stalk. His whine sounded like a predator's call. When he sat down in front of them and tilted his head, they saw threat assessment behavior. "He's evaluating us," Dr. Zethai whispered. "The creature is determining how to attack." No, Dr. Miller said desperately. "He's trying to comfort you. Max can sense that you're upset, and he wants to help." But the damage was done. The Corvani delegation fled the research station within the hour, sending panicked reports back to their government about humans using predators in scientific facilities. The reports described Max as a psychological weapon designed to intimidate alien researchers back on Earth. The situation continued to deteriorate. Agent Santos presented new intelligence that painted an even darker picture. The aliens are mobilizing their fleets. Long-range sensors show military formations moving toward our borders. President Rodriguez studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. "How many ships?" Conservative estimate? 3,000 vessels from 6 different species, Colonel Carter replied. "They're not just threatening quarantine anymore. This looks like preparation for war." "Over dogs?" the president asked incredulously. "Over what they perceive as humanity's ultimate weapon," Dr. Ross corrected. "They think we've created the perfect biological warfare system. Predators that love us, obey us, and will die for us." The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Humanity's greatest strength, their capacity for interspecies friendship, had been interpreted as their most dangerous weapon. The bonds of love and loyalty that made dogs mankind's best friends had convinced the galaxy that humans were monsters. "Options?" President Rodriguez asked. Colonel Carter looked grim. "We can try to explain, but after the research station incident, I doubt they'll listen. We can surrender our pets, but that's not happening, or we can prepare for war." "War," the president repeated quietly. "A war over the right to love our dogs?" Agent Santos nodded. "The galaxy is about to learn that there's nothing more dangerous than threatening someone's family. And to most humans, their pets are family." As the alien fleets moved toward human space, families across the colonies held their dogs a little tighter. Children played fetch with their companions, unaware that their games of catch might soon become the flashpoint for an interstellar conflict. The galaxy had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed that humanity's bond with their animals was based on domination and control. They were about to discover that it was based on something far more powerful and dangerous: love, the war they were preparing to fight would not be against humanity's weapons or technology. It would be against the fierce protective instinct that every human felt for their four-legged family members. In trying to take away man's best friend, the aliens had declared war on the human heart itself. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Endeavour, watching 3 alien warships maintain their positions around the human colony of Haven. The peaceful farming world had been chosen as the site for humanity's last, desperate attempt to prevent an interstellar war. "Captain, the alien delegation is requesting final security clearances," Amy Turner reported from the communications station. "They want confirmation that all apex predators are properly contained." Jake sighed and looked at Dr. Lisa Kim, who was reviewing her presentation notes for the 100th time. "Are you ready for this, Lisa?" Dr. Kim nodded, though her hands shook slightly as she organized her data tablets. "As ready as anyone can be to prove that love isn't a weapon." The past week had been a whirlwind of negotiations. When Captain Morrison suggested a controlled demonstration to show the true nature of human-canine relationships, most of the Galactic Council had dismissed the idea as obvious propaganda. But 3 members had agreed to witness the demonstration, driven by scientific curiosity and the slim hope of avoiding a devastating war. Ambassador Veltar had volunteered despite his terror from their first meeting. The warrior poet Thaxel of the hegemony of scales came because his culture respected courage above all else. Most surprising was Keshva, the Corvani pilot who had been rescued by the Johnson family. He had requested permission to attend against his government's direct orders. The alien delegates descended to Haven's surface in a heavily armed transport, wearing full environmental suits and accompanied by a dozen security guards. Their ship landed on a prepared field outside the colony's main settlement, where a small amphitheater had been constructed for the demonstration. Dr. Kim waited nervously as the aliens emerged from their transport. Each delegate carried scanning equipment to detect what they assumed would be concealed weapons and control devices. The security guards positioned themselves in a defensive formation as if expecting an attack at any moment. "Honored delegates," Dr. Kim began, speaking slowly and clearly into her universal translator, "thank you for coming. Today we hope to show you the true relationship between humans and our companion animals." Veltar stepped forward, his environmental suit making his movements awkward and mechanical. "Dr. Kim, we demand that all apex predators be secured behind barriers during this demonstration. Our safety cannot be guaranteed otherwise." "I understand your concerns," Dr. Kim replied, "but the barrier would prevent you from seeing the true nature of our relationship. The dogs will be under complete control at all times." Thaxel, the reptilian warrior poet, spoke through his translator with a voice like grinding stone. "Control through what means? We detect no electromagnetic fields, no chemical restraints, no technological devices. The control comes from trust and affection," Dr. Kim explained. "Our dogs obey us because they love us and we love them." The 3 aliens exchanged glances that clearly said they thought Dr. Kim was either lying or delusional. Keshva remained silent, his memories of Buddy's gentle care conflicting with everything his species believed about predators. "Let us begin," Dr. Kim announced. The first part of the demonstration took place in a fenced area that the aliens could observe from a safe distance. 10-year-old Sophie Harris entered the enclosure with her golden retriever, Lucky, carrying a bright red tennis ball. "Sophie is going to play with Lucky," Dr. Kim narrated. "This is a common activity that human children enjoy with their companion animals." Sophie threw the ball across the enclosure. Lucky bounded after it with obvious joy, his tail wagging furiously as he chased the flying object. When he caught the ball, instead of consuming it or destroying it as the aliens expected, he brought it back to Sophie and dropped it at her feet. "The predator returned the object," Thaxel observed, his voice filled with confusion. "It did not consume the prey item. It's not prey," Dr. Kim explained. "It's a toy. Lucky enjoys the game because it makes Sophie happy, and her happiness makes him happy." Sophie threw the ball again, and Lucky repeated the performance. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the apex predator played fetch with obvious delight. When Sophie knelt down to hug Lucky, the dog's tail wagged even harder, and he licked her face with gentle affection. "The child is not afraid," Valtar whispered. "The predator could easily harm her, but she shows no fear." "Because there's nothing to fear," Dr. Kim said. "Lucky would protect Sophie with his life. He would never hurt her." The demonstration continued, with various scenarios designed to show different aspects of human-canine relationships. They watched a guide dog named Apollo leading his blind handler through an obstacle course, demonstrating perfect trust and communication. A therapy dog named Bella comforted a young patient in a mock hospital setting, her gentle presence calming the child's anxiety. The most impressive demonstration involved a search and rescue exercise. A volunteer victim hid in a simulated disaster zone while a German shepherd named Ranger searched for them. When Ranger found the hidden person, he didn't attack or threaten them. Instead, he barked to alert his human handler and then stayed with the victim to provide comfort until help arrived. The predator located the vulnerable individual but did not exploit the opportunity. Thaxel noted, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This behavior contradicts all known predator patterns. But the real breakthrough came during the final demonstration. Dr. Kim had arranged for several working dogs to show their protective instincts. A group of sheep was led into the enclosure, followed by 3 border collies including Buddy from the Johnson farm. The aliens expected to witness a massacre. Instead, they watched the dogs gently guide the sheep with soft barks and careful nudges. When one sheep wandered too close to the fence, Buddy blocked its path and guided it back to the flock with patient persistence. "The predators are protecting the prey animals," Keshva said suddenly, speaking for the first time since arriving. "Just like Buddy protected the farm animals." "That's right," Dr. Kim confirmed. "These dogs are guardians. They've been bred and trained to protect other animals, not hunt them." The demonstration that finally convinced the aliens came when a mechanical threat was introduced. A remote-controlled device designed to look like a local predator approached the sheep. The 3 border collies immediately moved to intercept it, placing themselves between the perceived threat and the animals they were protecting. The dogs didn't attack the device, but they formed a defensive barrier and barked warnings, until Dr. Kim called them off. Their behavior was clearly protective, not aggressive, and their first instinct was to shield the vulnerable rather than harm them. Valtar removed his helmet, breathing the colony's clean air for the first time. His hands shook as he processed what he had witnessed. "They choose to protect instead of hunt. Every time," Dr. Kim confirmed. "That's what makes them special. They have all the instincts of predators, but they've learned to use those instincts to help and protect." Thaxel studied the scene with the eye of a military strategist. "This requires a level of psychological sophistication that we did not expect. The creatures must actively suppress their predatory instincts in favor of learned protective behaviors." "It's not suppression," Dr. Kim corrected. "It's evolution. Over thousands of years, humans and dogs have evolved together. We've become partners, each species making the other stronger and better." Keshva walked closer to the fence, watching Buddy interact with the sheep. "On the farm, I thought it was magic. Now I understand it's something more powerful than magic." "What's that?" Dr. Kim asked. "Choice," Keshva replied. "The predator chooses loyalty over hunger. The human chooses trust over fear. Both species choose love over survival." The demonstration concluded with a simple but powerful scene. Sophie. Harris sat in the grass with Lucky's head resting on her lap. The girl read quietly from a book while the golden retriever dozed peacefully in the afternoon sun. It was an image of perfect trust and contentment that spoke louder than any scientific explanation. "In our cultures," Valtar said quietly, "relationships are based on fear, necessity, or mutual benefit. We have never seen a bond based purely on affection and choice." "Maybe that's something we can teach you," Dr. Kim suggested hopefully. Thaxel watched the peaceful scene with something approaching wonder. "Your species has achieved something that we thought was impossible. You have tamed the untamable without breaking their spirit." "We didn't tame them," Dr. Kim corrected. We became family. As the alien delegates prepared to return to their ships, each carried with them a new understanding of humanity. The creatures they had feared as weapons of war were actually partners in peace. The bonds they had interpreted as control were actually expressions of the deepest form of trust, but the real test would come when they tried to explain this revelation to their own people. Could 3 witnesses convince an entire galaxy that love was stronger than fear? The answer would determine whether humanity would join the galactic community or stand alone against the stars. The evening after the demonstration, Dr. Lisa Kim sat alone in Haven Colony's small medical center, reviewing the day's events. The alien delegates had returned to their ships to discuss what they had witnessed, leaving her to wonder if humanity had done enough to prevent a war. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Keshva standing in the doorway, no longer wearing his environmental suit. The small Carvani looked fragile and uncertain, his blue skin pale in the artificial light. Dr. Kim, may I speak with you privately? Keshva asked, his translator giving his voice a hesitant quality. Of course, Dr. Kim replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Please, sit down. Keshva moved carefully, still favoring the leg that had been injured in his crash. As he settled into the chair, Dr. Kim noticed that his large eyes seemed troubled, as if he was wrestling with thoughts too large for his mind to contain. The demonstration today, Keshva began slowly, it has forced me to confront something that my people do not understand. Dr. Kim leaned forward, sensing that this conversation might be more important than any formal diplomatic meeting. What's troubling you? Companionship, Keshva said, the word seeming strange on his tongue. My species has no equivalent concept. We have alliances based on mutual benefit, partnerships for survival, breeding contracts for genetic improvement. But what I saw today, what I experienced with Buddy on the farm, we have no words for it. Dr. Kim nodded slowly. What we call friendship or love? Yes, but it goes deeper than that, Keshva continued, his skin shifting to a thoughtful purple. Hugh, when Buddy brought me my medicine each morning, he gained nothing from the action. When he stayed beside me during the thunderstorms, he received no reward. He helped me because my well-being mattered to him. The weight of this realization seemed to press down on Keshva's shoulders. In my culture, such behavior would be considered a mental defect, wasted energy, evolutionary weakness. Dr. Kim felt a chill as she began to understand the true scope of the misunderstanding between humanity and the galaxy. You don't have pets or companion animals? We have livestock for food. Working animals for labor and guard creatures for protection, Keshva explained. But we do not keep animals simply for the joy of their company. The concept of choosing to care for another species without gaining resources or status is foreign to us. What about within your own species? Dr. Kim asked. Do you care for family? Members, friends, loved ones? Keshva's silence stretched for several minutes before he answered. We care for our offspring until they reach independence, usually around 5 years of age. We maintain breeding partnerships as long as they produce viable offspring. We form alliances with individuals who can provide services or resources we need. But love? Dr. Kim pressed gently. Affection? Caring for someone simply because they matter to you? These concepts exist in our language as historical curiosities, Keshva admitted, his skin now a deep blue that Dr. Kim was learning indicated sadness. Ancient texts speak of such feelings, but modern Corvani society considers them primitive impulses that interfere with logical decision-making. Dr. Kim felt her heart ache for this lonely creature and his emotionally barren civilization. Is it the same for the other species in the Alliance? Worse in some cases, Keshva replied. The hegemony of Scales practices ritualized combat between siblings to determine dominance hierarchies. The ethereal collective exists in a state of constant mental networking that eliminates individual emotional bonds. The Silicon Brotherhood reproduces through technological fusion and has no concept of family units at all. The full tragedy of the situation began to dawn on Dr. Kim an entire galaxy of intelligent species had evolved without the capacity for genuine emotional connection. They had built vast civilizations, developed incredible technologies, and expanded across the stars, but they had never learned to love. "That's why you're so afraid of us," Dr. Kim said quietly. "It's not just that we have relationships with predators. It's that we have relationships at all." Keshva nodded slowly. When Ambassador Veltar saw Rex's devotion to Danny White, he didn't understand it as affection. He interpreted it as a form of biological control so sophisticated that it could make a predator voluntarily submit to prey. The idea that Rex chose to love Danny was incomprehensible. "And now," Dr. Kim asked, "now I have experienced something that my species believes is impossible," Keshva replied. "I felt safe with Buddy not because he was controlled or constrained, but because he cared about my well-being. When Pete and Carol nursed me back to health, they asked for nothing in return. They helped me because it was right, not because it benefited them." Dr. Kim watched as Keshva struggled with these revelations. "How does that make you feel?" "Empty," Keshva whispered. "I am 300 years old by your counting, and I have never experienced genuine care from another being. I have never offered it either. When I return to my people, I will go back to a life of cold transactions and calculated relationships." "It doesn't have to be that way," Dr. Kim said gently. "You could teach them what you've learned?" Keshva's laugh was bitter. "They would declare me mentally defective and remove me from society. The very fact that I am speaking to you now, expressing these thoughts, would be considered evidence of psychological contamination." Meanwhile, aboard the Hegemony warship, Dominance, Thaxel was having his own crisis of understanding. The warrior poet stood in his private quarters, staring at a holographic recording of the day's demonstration. Specifically, he watched the moment when the border collies had positioned themselves between the mechanical threat and the sheep they were protecting. In his culture, strength was measured by the ability to dominate others. Leaders were chosen through combat, territories were claimed by force, and survival belonged to the strongest. But what he had witnessed on Haven challenged everything he believed about power and control. The dogs had possessed overwhelming advantages over the sheep. They were faster, stronger, and far more intelligent than their charges. They could have easily killed any of the sheep and taken whatever they wanted. Instead, they had chosen to use their strength to protect the vulnerable. Strength and service. "Of the weak," Thaxel murmured, the words feeling strange in his language. Power used to protect rather than dominate. He thought about his own rise through the military hierarchy, built on defeating challengers and crushing opposition. He had never considered using his abilities to shield others from harm. The very idea would have been seen as weakness by his people, but watching those dogs defend the sheep, Thaxel had seen something that looked remarkably like honor. True honor, not the hollow victory of defeating a weaker opponent, but the genuine nobility of sacrificing oneself for others. On the ethereal collective vessel Harmony of Minds, Ambassador Veltar was experiencing his own transformation. As a member of a species that shared thoughts collectively, the concept of individual emotional bonds was particularly alien to him. Corvani existed in a state of perpetual mental connection, making privacy and personal relationships unnecessary. But today he had witnessed something that the collective consciousness could not explain or replicate. He had seen the unique bond between Sophie Harris and Lucky, a connection that existed between two individuals and belonged to no one else. The purity of that relationship fascinated and terrified him in equal measure. In his society, all thoughts and feelings were shared among the group. There were no secrets, no private moments, no special connections between individuals. Everything was communal, efficient, and sterile. Watching Sophie and Lucky together, Veltar had glimpsed something his species had lost in their evolution toward collective consciousness. They had gained perfect understanding and cooperation, but they had sacrificed the intimate joy of personal affection. As the three alien delegates processed their individual revelations, emergency communications began flooding their ships. The Demonstration had been broadcast live to the Galactic Council, and the reactions were explosive. Conservative factions declared the entire event to be human propaganda designed to weaken galactic resolve. Progressive groups called for immediate reevaluation of the human threat assessment. Military leaders demanded more time to study the implications of interspecies loyalty for their strategic planning, but perhaps most troubling were the reports beginning to filter in from across alien space. Citizens who had watched the broadcast were asking questions that their societies were unprepared to answer. What did it mean to love without expectation of return? Why would anyone choose to care for another species? Could their own civilizations learn to form such bonds? The demonstration had accomplished something far more significant than preventing a war. It had planted seeds of change in minds that had never considered the possibility of genuine emotional connection. For the first time in their histories, entire species were wondering what they might be missing. Dr. Kim finished her conversation with HFY. As the alien prepared to return to his ship, "Will you tell them what you learned here?" 6 months after the demonstration on Haven, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching construction crews from 12 different species work together to build the galaxy's first interspecies colony. The irony was not lost on him that the same aliens who had once fled in terror from Rex were now eagerly learning about human-animal relationships. The transformation had not been immediate or easy. The first breakthrough came when HFY returned to the Corvani homeworld and was declared mentally unstable by his government. But instead of accepting treatment to remove his contaminated thoughts about companionship and love, he had requested asylum with humanity. "Admiral," Dr. Lisa Kim approached, carrying a data tablet and followed by a small Jack Russell Terrier named Pip. "The morning briefings are ready, and we have some interesting developments to report." Jake smiled as he watched Pip trot alongside Dr. Kim with obvious pride. The little dog wore a specially designed vest that identified him as the galaxy's first officially recognized interspecies therapy animal. His adoption by Ambassador Quilmeth of the Ethereal Collective had shocked the scientific community and sparked a revolution in alien thinking. "How is our ethereal friend adjusting to pet ownership?" Jake asked. "He insists it's purely for research purposes," Dr. Kim replied with a grin. "But yesterday I caught him teaching Pip how to fetch using tentacle movements instead of thrown objects. He's even started talking to Pip in private, which is remarkable for a species that normally shares all thoughts collectively." The communications panel on Jake's desk chimed with an incoming message. Amy Turner's voice came through clearly, though. She was now stationed on Earth as the head of the new Interspecies Communication Department. "Admiral Morrison, President Rodriguez sends her congratulations on the 6-month anniversary of the Harmony Accords. The treaty ratification ceremonies are proceeding as planned across all member worlds." Jake activated the reply channel. "Thank you, Amy. How are the integration programs progressing?" "Beyond all expectations, sir. We have waiting lists for the companion animal programs on 47 worlds. The Kovani have established their first emotional bonding research centers, and the hegemony of scales is requesting military advisors to help them understand the concept of protective service rather than dominance hierarchy. The most surprising transformation had come from Thaxel and his warrior culture. After witnessing the demonstration on Haven, the reptilian military leader had spent weeks studying human concepts of honor and sacrifice. He had eventually requested permission to train with human military units to understand how strength could be used to protect rather than conquer. The results had been extraordinary. Thaxel's integration with a Marine unit and their military working dogs had revolutionized hegemony military doctrine. Instead of fighting for individual glory, their soldiers were learning to fight for each other and for the protection of civilians. "Dr. Kim," Jake said, turning back to his science officer, "what's the status on the adoption centers?" "We have our first interspecies adoption ceremony scheduled for this afternoon," Dr. Kim replied, her excitement obvious. 3 Corvani families, 2 ethereal researchers, and 1 very nervous hegemony diplomat are being matched with companion Animals from the rescue ships. The rescue ships had been Jake's idea. When word spread about humanity's relationship with animals, reports began flooding in about abandoned and mistreated creatures from across the galaxy. Most alien species had working animals that they discarded when they became old or injured. Having no concept of caring for non-productive creatures, humanity had immediately launched a rescue operation, sending ships equipped with veterinary facilities to collect these abandoned animals. The creatures were rehabilitated, trained, and prepared for adoption by alien families who wanted to experience interspecies companionship for the first time. Any word from the Verdant Collective? Jake asked. The plant-based species had been among the most resistant to the new ideas, claiming that their photosynthetic nature made them incompatible with animal companions. Actually, yes, Dr. Kim said, consulting her tablet. They've discovered that certain earth plants and small animals can form symbiotic relationships that benefit both species. They're requesting a delegation to study how cooperation can enhance survival rather than compete for resources. The transformation of galactic society had accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. The concept of love and genuine emotional bonds had spread like wildfire through civilizations that had never experienced such connections. Young aliens especially embraced the new ideas, leading to generational conflicts on many worlds as traditional power structures were challenged. The afternoon adoption ceremony took place in Harmony Station's Central Plaza, a beautiful space designed to accommodate multiple atmospheric requirements and gravity preferences. Families from different species waited nervously as human volunteers brought out animals that had been carefully matched to their new families. Veltar, the former ambassador who had first fled from Rex, knelt beside a small golden retriever puppy named Sunshine. His blue skin had returned to its healthy color, and his large eyes showed wonder instead of fear as the puppy licked his hand with gentle affection. "She is not afraid of me," Veltar whispered to Dr. Kim, who was overseeing the ceremony. "Why would she be afraid?" Dr. Kim asked. "You're going to love her and take care of her. She can sense that." "But I am alien to her species," Veltar said, still amazed by the puppy's trust. "In our understanding of nature, different species should fear each other. Love transcends species," Dr. Kim explained. "That's what makes it so powerful." Across the plaza, Thaxel sat cross-legged beside a large German shepherd named Valor, a retired military working dog whose handler had been killed in action. The warrior poet's reptilian features showed a gentleness that would have been impossible in his old culture. "This creature served with honor," Thaxel said, running his clawed hand gently over Valor's scarred fur. "He protected his human family and asks for nothing in return but companionship in his retirement." "Valor gave his best years to service," the human volunteer explained. "Now he deserves to be loved for who he is, not what he can do." The concept revolutionized Thaxel's understanding of value and worth. In his society, old warriors were cast aside when they could no longer fight. The idea of honoring their service and caring for them in their later years was completely foreign but deeply appealing. The most touching moment came when a young Corvani child named Zephyia met her new companion, a small beagle mix named Hope. The child had been born with a genetic condition that made her different from other Corvani, marking her as an outcast in their efficiency-focused society, but Hope saw only a friend who needed love. The little dog approached Zephyia without hesitation, gently placing her head on the child's lap and wagging her tail with pure joy. For the first time in her short life, Zephyia experienced unconditional acceptance. "She likes me," Zephyia said, in wonder, her skin shifting to colors that her parents had never seen before. "She likes me just as I am." The ceremony concluded with the signing of the final interspecies cooperation accords, establishing humanity as the official mediators for interspecies conflicts throughout the galaxy. More importantly, the accords recognized the right of all species to form emotional bonds and to be protected in those relationships. As the weeks passed, reports came in from across the galaxy of remarkable changes. Crime rates dropped on worlds where companion animal programs had been established. Mental health improved dramatically among species that had never even had words for concepts like depression or loneliness. Military conflicts decreased as species learned to value protection over conquest. The ripple effects continued to spread. Young aliens who had formed bonds with companion animals began demanding emotional connections with their own families and communities. Ancient social structures based on purely transactional relationships began to crumble. As new generations discovered the power of love and friendship, Jake stood in his quarters that evening, looking out at the stars and thinking about how much had changed. Rex lay at his feet, the same gentle dog whose presence had nearly started an interstellar war. Now Rex was a symbol of hope and transformation across the galaxy. "Who would have thought," Jake said, scratching Rex behind the ears, "that a dog's love could change the entire universe?" Rex looked up at his human companion with trusting brown eyes and wagged his tail, as if to say that love had always been the most powerful force in the cosmos. Humans had simply been the first species wise enough to recognize it. The final entry in Dr. Kim's research log read simply, "The creatures that aliens once feared as monsters have become the teachers of love itself. In showing them the bonds between humans and dogs, we have taught the galaxy that strength without compassion is hollow, that intelligence without emotion is barren, and that the greatest victories come not from conquest but from caring. The universe will never be the same." As night fell on Harmony Station, families from a dozen different worlds tucked their new companions into bed, learning for the first time what it meant to love and be loved unconditionally.